Welcome, everybody, here to Basketball Passport. I am Anthony Irwin here on this fine Sunday evening. That team that you just watched there is Lonnie Walker's new team, right? Do I have that right?
That's correct, 100% right. Zalgiris out of Lithuania and Kaunas.
I've been doing this now with you for a few weeks, and I'm recognizing teams. Look at me go,
Oh man, you're flying, man.
baby steps.
You're gonna. It's how it starts, though, man. They really win with one or two of those crowd shots, and then before you know it, you're a EuroLeague stan.
If I were Lonnie though, and I saw that, I'd be so pumped to play there. That would be such a unique opportunity. That it just obviously you'd prefer to be in the NBA, and I think he will be back in the NBA. He's better than a third of the Lakers roster right now, anyway. So, yeah, I think eventually he'll be back. But I don't know if you're going to experience something. That seems pretty fun. That seems all right.
I guarantee there's a lot of guys who, see EuroLeague as a step down. And yes, it is. But once they get there, they have a really, really fun time. I spoke to Luke Sikma, son of Jack Sikma, who was on the at Olympiacos at the Final Four in Berlin this year. And basically he said that he couldn't believe just how electrifying the crowds were and how much fun the league was. And, obviously he had eyes on the NBA, but having a really, really fun time playing in Europe. Certainly playing for Olympiacos helps as well. They've got some of the most passionate and incredible fans in all of Europe.
I have some friends who either I played with in college or in high school and stuff that went abroad, and they all said that like it was some of the best times of their entire life. Going and playing there. That other voice that you heard there, that is Leigh Ellis. That other face you could see there is Leigh Ellis. I'm Anthony Irwin. I am the senior Lakers insider for Clutch Points. Leigh Ellis is Leigh effing Ellis. I think that's just your actual legal name, correct?
Well, actually this week, funny you should say that. Hawks, I live in Atlanta for anyone who doesn't know, so I go to all the Hawks games. I were playing the Wizards. And a play happened, and Trae Young got fouled while shooting a three-pointer that went in. The refs called it off and said, no, that was on the ground. So it could have been a 4-point play. The Hawks ended up losing that game by 2. Afterwards, I asked Quinn Snorri, I said, how come you didn't challenge that? And he sort of looked at me funny, and he said, we can't challenge that. And I was like, why not? I was confused. I thought you could challenge it, but you can't actually challenge. They called the foul, so you can't contest the foul. What the interpretation of the foul was. You can only contest whether or not the play happened. So the fact they called it on the ground stood, even though it was the wrong call and they lost. Anyway, so I was a bit embarrassed and confused in the pros game, and then Kevin Chouinard showed me. He goes, "You can't challenge that." And I'm like, "Oh my god, that's embarrassing." Anyway, so again, the Hawks lost. I saw Quinn on Friday night here when the Hawks played against the Sacramento Kings, and he came up and said, "What the fuck, man? Ask me about my challenge." I said, "I'm sorry, man. I got that wrong. But
that's where you got to play it off and say, like, I was just making sure you were paying attention. I gave you the opportunity to dunk on the reporter. You're welcome."
Well, hey, I've got to say, man, Quinn's a class act, though. Didn't embarrass me or hold it against me or anything like that. We had a little talk, a bit of a laugh, and we move on. So there you go. Maybe that's my nickname from now on.
It's essentially what people call me in my house.
For
very different reasons. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about the Milwaukee Bucks. They have struggled out of the gate since Doc Rivers has taken over. They have been a significantly worse basketball team than under Adrian Griffin, who they didn't like. We're going to talk a little bit about the best team in the NBA. We're going to try to figure out who that is between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. We'll talk about Joel Embiid getting into it with a reporter over the weekend, and Vince Carter's ceremony in Toronto, where his number finally went up into the Raptors. I don't believe we have a mailbag question, but if we get questions or comments over the course of the show, hit us up with those. If you want to send us one to our super easy to remember email, it is basketballpassportpod@gmail.com. A quick reminder, please do hit subscribe here on the YouTube channel. If you're watching us live on Twitter, head on over to youtube.com/@basketballpassport is where you could find us there. If you're listening to us in audio form, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and give us those 5-star reviews on iTunes. Those tend to help as well. And yeah, we'll go ahead and dive on into this thing where Leigh, I don't think I've seen very many examples of this where one, the Milwaukee Bucks fired Adrian Griffin when they were playing good basketball. They were winning far more often than they were losing. And then they go out and they hire Doc Rivers, who kind of burns his bridges with ESPN because of the way that he departed there. But they bring in Doc Rivers, and he told people at the time he wasn't sure that this was the right move for him to make. It kind of reminds me of Monty Williams, right? Where Monty Williams didn't want to take the Detroit Pistons job. They just gave him so much money that he was like, okay.
Yeah.
That's basically how Odyssey got you to do this pod, right? It was like, but they basically they bring in Doc Rivers. It has been pretty messy ever since. Obviously, expectations are still through the roof because you have Giannis and you have Dame there. It has been absolutely brutal to start the season. What do you think is going on?
Yeah, there's lots of problems. I mean, it's certainly easy to just point the finger at Doc. I mean, he's one of those coaches that people will say, you know, he doesn't know how to coach in the playoffs, and you know, he tends to, you know, things tend to end badly. But I respect Doc for the coaching that he's been for a long time. You know, it's not easy in this league, and he has had more wins than losses, but he's had some pretty bad losses, especially in the playoffs, which certainly haunt you. But I think this honestly goes higher than Doc Rivers. I think this goes back to firing Michael Budenholzer. You know, now, okay, if you're going to make a change, fine. Okay, Budenholzer, you know, you can. It's easy to sort of fire the coach there. But signing Griffin, I think, was the worst mistake they made. You don't get a first-time coach when you're in championship win mode with Giannis like that. I just don't think that was the right decision. And then I obviously like them going to get Damian Lillard, but not at the cost of Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday was so important for that connection and chemistry there with Giannis. You know, defensively, he was just incredible, which we knew the Bucks were going to miss that when they signed Lillard. Now, Lillard is a more dynamic offensive player in the sense that we saw last night. He went for 41, hit 10 threes. You know, he has a deeper range. He can get to the line. He can outscore Drew Holiday. But sometimes it's about just the right fit and the right chemistry. And that's, I think, now what we're seeing. Damon and Giannis still really don't look like they've got it all figured out. Last night, raced out to a lead there against the Cavs, up by 17 points, the undefeated Cavs. But it still feels to me like it feels a little bit to me like Iverson and Melo in Denver, where it's like your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn. You know, both go out and get theirs, but it doesn't necessarily lead to success and to winning. And so when I see Giannis and Lillard out there, I just don't see them sort of working together. I see them be like, you know, I'm a dynamic scorer and so are you, and they go out and get their buckets, but it just feels like it's a very disjointed team right now. They're also still missing Chris Middleton, we should point out, who I think, you know, again, one of those guys, he goes through that Ferris wheel, you know, like he's either underrated, you know, goes out and scores 35, then he becomes overrated.
Never properly rated.
Yeah, no one knows exactly what it is. But, you know, right now the Bucks blowing that one again last night on the Donovan Mitchell shot. Donovan Mitchell nearly lost the ball himself on that play, comes back and knocks it in. And the Bucks slump here to 1-5 after winning their first game. So it's sometimes, again, you can look at just the aesthetics of how a team is playing, and the Bucks are just not playing fun basketball right now. You know, I don't think their defense is great. And again, I just think on offense, it feels like, okay, Giannis is just having his little moment here, and then Lillard's going to have his. And that's, you know, one of the problems. But, you know, Griffin, you're right. Griffin was like the David Blatt situation in Cleveland. He was winning well and truly over 500. But there were certainly rumblings coming out of Milwaukee that everyone wasn't happy. Griffin wasn't communicating well. He wasn't liked by the players. And so they made that move. But it also smacked a bit of desperation to be like, we fired him without really thinking about who was going to replace him.
Yeah.
Grab Doc Rivers. He's the veteran, and but as we know, like Doc, he's flawed, despite the fact that I overall respect his success. But anytime things go wrong, it's so easy to pile on him.
I just think coaching in the NBA, you said it at the top, it's one of the toughest jobs in almost any industry. And if you go into it and you aren't 1 zillion% bought into, I can't wait to coach this team. Let's do this. Let's go. Let's get after it. If you aren't 10 toes in the dirt, as kids like to say now, like, you're screwed. Like, you players are going to figure that out really, really quickly. I think I'm with you. I think it's a variety of issues. I think the roster is old. It's slow. You look at Brook Lopez looks to be definitely on the downslope of his career now. He looks a couple steps behind all the time. Bobby Portis is clearly, also, on the downturn, on the back nine of his kind of NBA career. And there just isn't, Pat Connaughton hasn't been very good at the start of the season. It's forced Taurean Prince to play like 30 plus minutes a night, which I watched Taurean last year. He's very good if he's playing 20 to 25 minutes a night, but there's a very quick, drop off if his role expands much beyond that. And look, like, we also have to lay some blame at the Stars' feet, right? Like, you mentioned that it feels like your turn, my turn with Dame and Giannis. There is no reason whatsoever for that to be the case. You have Dame, an incredible pick and roll player. You have Giannis, very easily could be setting screens and operating in the 1-4 pick and roll with Dame. Giannis has never really liked doing that. Has always kind of moved away from being involved in those kinds of sets, dribble handoff stuff. I mentioned pick and roll stuff, off ball screening and cutting and stuff like that. And when your stars, like, when there are things that they also just aren't very interested in doing, well, that's going to seep into what other players are going to be willing or unwilling to do. So I think all around, it's a very broken situation that, look, there was a report from CBS, Bill Ryder, saying that, if things continue to go this way, there are people around the league kind of waiting for Giannis to start kind of looking elsewhere. My favorite response to that was like, report Team X interested in Giannis if he hits the trade market.
Yeah.
No, you don't say.
Yeah, or the classic Masai Ujiri considering making a run if Giannis becomes available. Like, yeah. Smart. That's a smart move. If I'm a GM, I would consider making a run at one of the most athletic players the league has ever seen.
The framing is consider making a run, not like well, not all the way in, not jumping for joy at the opportunity.
Yeah.
I'll think about it. I gotta send some emails. I gotta talk about it with my people.
Yeah.
We'll see how this thing goes. For Giannis.
I know. It was the same last time before Giannis signed his extension. Remember, it was like, championship or bust, and he signed it, I think, before that season. But it was that constant innuendo and speculation of, he might sign somewhere else. It's like, well, he might, but the Bucks are not going to skimp out on this deal. They'll throw at him whatever they can. Mm-hmm. And Giannis, I think sometimes that, he's so honest that can go account against him, because he sort of has said, I believe he's been quoted, directly saying, like, if it's not here, I might look around. So all that does then is it starts that trend then of like, I think there's Steph Curry eyes potential partnership with Giannis, and it's like, again, I can definitely see the Warriors showing some interest in Giannis if he hits the market.
I think my favorite moment in all of this was Giannis, trying out a new path to trade request where he was like, look, if we don't win a championship, I could get traded.
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah, yeah,
completely out of his hands. Like he has
yeah,
nothing to say on the matter. Like
yeah,
they could trade me. They
yeah,
could even trade me to the Warriors, Leigh. They
yeah.
could,
That's right. Yeah,
they might ask me which teams that I would consider being traded to, but at the end of the day, they could send me anywhere. Just look at my teammate Damian Lillard, who has hated Milwaukee since he walked through the door. So
yeah,
Dame
yeah. I mean
also
that.
has
Yeah,
some
yeah,
culpability here too. He isn't defending
for
anybody,
sure.
and
Yeah,
there's just you mentioned the loss of Drew Holiday, and that stuff. All of it seems to add up to a team that can't quite get stops. And if you aren't running sets that feature your two best players, you're playing with one hand tied behind your back.
yeah, and that's always been one of Lillard's deficiencies. He has never been a great defender, but again,
Yeah.
if you're not getting that stop at the point of attack on defense, then all it does is allow teams to go inside the paint, and that's what I noticed actually last night against the Cavs. Now they got some big guys there in Mobley and Allen, but they seem to get into the paint. Brook Lopez used to be able to really deter people from coming into the paint just because he was such a big presence. But the Cavs felt last night, that was not the case. They could get in there fairly easily. And, another thing for me is when you have a big lead like the Bucks did, a 17-point lead, but then you lose that very quickly, that to me also shows that there's not real substance behind that lead. It was almost more like they just got hot. Lillard hit a ton of threes. They built this lead up, but then the Bucks gave it back to Cleveland fairly quickly. Yeah. So now, look, they still had a chance to win and probably should have. Lillard hit a nice little fadeaway there, 2-pointer to give them the lead. But Mitchell, I mean, man, that was a comfortable shot that he took and knocked it in. And look, the Cavs are a good team. They're unbeaten so
We're about
far,
to talk to them as one of the, if not the best team in the league.
So. Really fun to watch. So, that in itself is not a terrible loss there for the Bucks. It's just when you add up all the other factors, things are certainly not going their way.
Yep. Well, obviously something to keep an eye on. I'm here to report that, if Giannis considers podcasting in his second career, we will consider adding Giannis to the podcast. we will consider it, maybe.
He would certainly be an addition to the Thursday's passport show. He can give us a little bit of insight into the international side of things. So
just depends on draft capital.
We'd consider it, but only for the Thursday show at this stage.
Yes. Giannis, too much too soon is a bad thing, man.
That's right. That's right.
Let's talk about those Cleveland Cavaliers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Both teams just come absolutely storming out of the gate. I don't think the Thunder, if they have, they've only beaten for a while there. They were winning every game by double digits. They are still waiting for Hartenstein to come back.
Yeah.
The Cavs just beat the absolute brakes off of the Lakers the other night. When it was funny going into it, I reported that the Lakers were going to try to find a moment there for Bronny to get onto the court. And it really kind of felt like the Cavs players took that personally. It's like, oh, you're going to do the publicity stunt on our court now, huh? All right. And that second quarter was just ugly. It was just, that game was over quickly. Bronny did wind up getting onto the game and scored his first basket and got a good ovation from the crowd. But the Cavs absolutely walloped the Lakers. Yeah. They're with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, they are defending the rim in almost unscorable ways. It's making up for some of the size issues on the perimeter with Darius Garland and with Donovan Mitchell. Kenny Atkins appears to be shocking. He was a really good coach in Brooklyn, and then KD wanted Steve Nash, and Atkinson, I thought, got a raw deal there. He now gets another opportunity after working in Golden State for a little while. Appears to be really good. If you had to choose between the two teams here, OKC or Cleveland, who do you think is the better squad right now?
Well, I'll go with the Thunder because their defense is just bulletproof right now. They're the only team allowing less than 100 a game. And I saw them last Sunday night against my Atlanta Hawks, and the Hawks actually played them pretty well. But when it was defense time, man, they just locked in. They forced Trey into 10 turnovers. Again, the Hawks are a little sort of short-handed right now, but they're not quite even at full strength in the same class as the Thunder. It just feels like every single one of those guys is in your face. I mean, you know what Caruso's like. He's just a really tenacious defender. Lou Dort, he's another one. He feels like the football player out there on the court. And then, of course, having Chet there anchor it in the middle, it means that even if you do somehow get past that perimeter D, you've got to get over a guy whose arms feel like it makes him about 9 or 10 feet tall. So the Thunder right now are really just rolling on both ends, have, such a good point differential. They're so tough. And Mark Daigneault doing a fantastic job coaching that team. Shea's been brilliant. So I would lean towards the Thunder again, just because I think defensively they would hold the Cavs down right now. But it will be a good matchup. I'm not sure when they do face off. They'll only face off twice, being East versus West. But it's really exciting to see two of these smaller market teams, just really, steamwalking through the NBA right now. They're fun, both fun to watch, because I think it's not just being one on one side of the ball, it's being one on both sides. And even on offense, the Thunder, that ball is really moving around. They're a really fun unit to watch out there. So I lean towards them. Again, I think defense is what sort of separates them right now from the Cavs. The Cavs are allowing a lot more points, but everyone's sort of giving up a ton of points right now, the way the NBA is being played. But Thunder, super impressive, and they do get Hartenstein back. He's still a while away. I don't think he's back anytime soon, but they certainly are not missing him in the sense that he needs to rush back. And when he does come back, that's just going to make them even stronger, even deeper, and having a second unit maybe as potent defensively as their first.
We do have a question here on this topic. Mike Weisberg, or not question, but a comment saying Boston's better than both of the teams. I understand where that would be coming from. Former champions, they absolutely raced through the league last year. No reason to think that they will take much of a step back, if one at all. My only thing here is no team that won a championship the year before over the last 5 years or so has gotten out of the second round. And I think there's a lot of attrition there. Boston isn't exactly young. Al Horford is old, like outright old. Drew Holiday is well into his career as well. I think it wouldn't surprise me at all if Boston gets better over the course of the year too. The thing that terrifies me about the Thunder, Leigh, is if they sense that this is a year that they can not even go all in, but continue to add to their roster, they have roughly 73 draft picks over the next 5 years. Like they could, if Giannis becomes available, and they have more than enough draft capital to send to Milwaukee for Giannis. And now all of a sudden you're, depending on who you send out, now all of a sudden you're adding Giannis to this incredible OKC roster. Boston, I don't think, can quite do that. I don't think they have the draft capital to be able to do that, without like moving a Jaylen Brown or something like that, which I don't think Boston would want to do. And then, in Cleveland, they used a lot of their draft capital to go out and get Donovan Mitchell. Oklahoma City Thunder is set up not just to be a absolutely incredible team right now, but don't let them win one because I think they're good. They're only going to get better. This draft cash that Sam Presti has built up over the years is absolutely terrifying. So much so that some teams around the league are like, look, once they decide to start pushing chips in, you may as well just keep your powder dry because we might be in for a dynastic run.
Well, possibly. I mean, that's what Sam Presti's MO has been, though, isn't it? Just to stock all these draft picks. And then, he's got both options on the table because he's proven to be a pretty savvy GM when it comes to drafting players. And now he can, if necessary, sweeten any deal. He's, with all these picks that he's got coming up over the next few years. But if he's going to do it in a way where he's just going to keep developing these young players, it could be a little bit of a situation they had there with Harden and Westbrook and Durant, where they just couldn't afford to keep all of them. So it could
Yeah.
almost, backfire in that sense. But that's certainly not anything they're going to be concerned about right now, because what I really see about the Thunder is they all seem to be completely connected and on the same page. You see after games, when they do their
Yeah.
TV interview,
Talking.
everyone comes out there. And I think for Shea Gilgeous-Alexander as the leader of that team, that's really important, that he's the one who's like, these are my guys. We win together. They haven't lost yet, but they lose together. They play really, really well together. But Mike, look, I think the Celtics, a bit like they were last season, they sort of get overlooked because there's no drama around that team. They're all playing really well. Again, I don't think there's also any tension between Brown and Tatum. They understand, listen, man, if we're winning, who really cares who scores all the points and does everything? So the Celtics, it's great for them right now that they're maybe flying under the radar, because I think overall they are certainly a better team than Cleveland at their best. Cleveland, has the record right now, but I think the Celtics are a better team because they're experienced. For Brown and Tatum, they've been to the finals twice. They've been to the conference finals 4 or 5 times as well. So they've got the experience. They're still young enough. And they can defend. They get Porzingis back, who, again, who knows really what you're going to get out of Porzingis. He's always injured, but if they can get him back and he can come off the bench for 15, 20 minutes a night and just shoot and get a couple of easy baskets, that just makes them even more dynamic. So I think you're right there, Mike. I think Boston probably is the best team in the Eastern Conference. But right now things are, again, just smoothly. There's no consistency. They're here tomorrow night in Atlanta. I'll be down there for that game. So maybe my Hawks on a back-to-back are going to stun them. Trae Young actually plays pretty well usually against the Celtics, but it's usually in Boston where he plays better. So we'll see what happens down here. But Boston, very, very impressive out of the gate as well.
Yeah, look, the league has basically built itself, to welcome parity with open arms, and it doesn't surprise me that you now have a handful of teams here between OKC, between Cleveland, between Boston, between Dallas, that can really make a run at this in various very serious fashion. Let's talk about Philly, who I wouldn't say is on the opposite end of that spectrum. They are certainly on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of how their season has started. Now, according to Shams Charania, Paul George is finally going to make his Sixers debut. He had that scary knee injury in preseason that apparently led to a contusion of the knee. And so he's finally rested and recovered and ready to go, hopefully early this week. Joel Embiid, apparently not those things. He has not been able to go. That has obviously led to some contentious moments between the team and their reporters. And one reporter in particular, I believe is Marcus Hayes, wrote a column where I think the central message of the article, I don't think is all that arguable. Joel Embiid needs to be more available. But Joel took problem with a line in that column where Hayes questioned whether Joel Embiid's deceased brother and the kid that he lost would be ashamed of him for not showing up for work. That is where you really cross the line. That led to Embiid called him out by name in a scrum before one of the games, and then apparently after the game in the locker room confronted Hayes. There was some shoving reportedly, and here we stand now, where I don't we haven't gotten any word on if the league is going to take any action here. They said that they are kind of in fact-finding mode right now. Really, really sad situation all around. I think Philly has handled the injury information really, really poorly. I think it falls in line with how a lot of these teams mismanage that information. You can't also push reporters almost under any circumstance. And then that reporter, you can't cross that line there and expect for a father who lost his kid to not say something or do something to you. Leigh, what's your takeaway from all of this situation?
Yeah, I mean, questioning Embiid's desire or willingness to play. I don't understand that because, listen, I mean, this guy missed the first 2 years of his career and he only played 31 games through his first 3 seasons because of injury. He's a big, heavy dude, so those injuries can catch up. And he's one of those guys that when he does get injured, he tends to miss some time because he's such a big dude. And so I find that a little surprising. I think if he's, to imply in some way that he's, not wanting to play or he's goofing around or he's not trying to get himself in shape, seems, a little odd. And, Mike's also just pointing out here, I think it was just his younger brother.
Yeah, I'm looking at that now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's his younger brother there who passed away.
The way
his
that
son
Joel phrased it, he said, shoves reporter for bringing up, quote, my dead brother and my son. In
his son being born was inspiration.
Named after his brother.
Yes, and his brother passing away. Now, again, I read the article. I don't think there's any need at all to bring up the brother. I don't feel that added anything to the story because, again, what you're implying by that is that, well, hey, man, get over it sort of thing. And that to me is just not necessary. That's not a part of what's happening right now. Embiid and the league, of course, fined the Sixers $100,000 for, misreporting on his injury, but we didn't see him in the preseason and he hasn't played at all yet. To me, all that says is whatever injury he's suffering, he hasn't yet been able to complete and get back out on the court. And the Sixers know that if they rush him back, then this could be one of those ones that knocks him out for longer, potentially the whole season. So it seems like that reporter was, maybe trying to provoke a reaction and he got it. Now, Embiid can't go out there and assault or strike or push or shove or anything like that either. There has to be some decorum. So it'll be very interesting to see how the NBA handles this. I haven't seen any footage. It doesn't appear as though there was any, because I say that because you would think it would have been all over the social media if that's the case. But I know just from following, some of the Sixers reporters, there feels like there is a lot of tension between the media and the team this season. Nick Nurse has had a couple of tense scrums and press conferences and things like that. So I think it's starting to boil over. They're losing. Paul George hasn't played. They lose at home to the Pistons there last night. So certainly for a team that is also in championship expectation mode, things haven't gotten off to a good start. And they find themselves in a bit of a hole here. And, these sorts of things certainly can bubble over into the situation. But there has to be clearly some lines that can't be crossed when you're the reporter, but certainly the physical altercation also can't happen from a player to a reporter.
The NBPA has been looking for a reason to start revoking credentials and limiting access for reporters in the locker room and stuff like that. I think it would be a mistake. Reporters, when the relationship is a healthy one, reporters inform the fan on what is going on there, holds the team that they cover to account. And by the way, the Sixers 100% deserve to be held to account for how they've managed that situation and the information flow. And, the league literally fined them for the way that they've managed this. So, again, I take no issue, honestly, with the message that the reporter tried to get across in the column. The execution of it, and when you start crossing that line, and when it becomes, because that felt personal, right?
Yes,
your
right.
brother would be ashamed of you.
Yes.
That's when it's like you once the take becomes personal, then you lose any sight of the issue at hand. And look, people who follow my stuff know that I get really frustrated with the Lakers too. But I try to always make sure that, if I'm criticizing, it is never a personal shot at any of these people as human beings. Because again, that's when you give the story at that point becomes the reporter and not the thing that people care about, which is, hey, when are we going to see Embiid play? What's up? Why haven't we seen him? He just played in the Olympics. Should he have not played in the Olympics? Is he not in shape? there's always been questions about Embiid's, commitment to staying in shape, and his conditioning level has always been kind of a touchy subject there in Philadelphia. Mention that, like, that's I think fair play. But once you step over that line, he didn't step over the line. He jumped over it. He spit on the line on his way back, and it's just like, this was this entire situation is just a tough look for everybody involved. And I the players here, they're told, take the high road, don't confront the guy, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. I honestly can't even blame Joel, because that would be a tough, that scar is never going to fully heal when you lose a sibling like that. And when you cross that line and, you put yourself in a position where you allow another human being that moment to consider, is it worth it for me to actually lay hands on this guy?
Yeah.
Once you put yourself in that position, it just depends on how that person feels that day. And frankly, when you look at how big Embiid is and how small the average reporter is, probably pretty lucky that all it was a shove. Probably pretty lucky that it didn't escalate beyond that.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to actually interview Joel Embiid, and he's one of those dudes who he is a gigantic human.
Yeah.
In Back to the Future, when Biff stands up to Marty, and he just feels like he's about 8 feet tall.
Yeah,
he's like that, Embiid.
Embiid is almost literally 8 feet tall.
Yeah, but listen, I have sympathy for Embiid, because I just can't imagine a player of his ability and the amount of time that he's missed, that he's just like, I don't really care, I'm just going to get back in shape on my time when I feel like it. I think he's trying to get back, and he's facing some setbacks because he's dealing with an injury, and it takes time. He's a little bit older as well now, so those previous injuries, as I mentioned earlier, are likely going to catch up with him as well. So we'll see what the NBA does, and if that does impact other locker rooms around the league. I mean, you're right. The NBA PA has been sort of trying to limit access, but I think that would be a gigantic mistake, because I think that's where you find out information, and you find out what's going on, and you can tell stories. And being at games, as I've noticed this season alone, I was there for a few last year, but this is different. Being in the locker rooms, both locker rooms before the game, the coaches' press conferences, both pre and post game, that's where it's not just the words that they say. You pick up on the body language, and you pick up on little signs here and there, and those things are really important to help tell the story and share what's actually happening with a team, rather than just saying, well, I watched it on TV, I saw the box score, this is the conclusion I'm drawing. Instead, you're like, well, I saw an interaction between this player and the coach. I saw that on the sidelines. I saw the way that the teams were responding, and then I heard from the coach and the players themselves. And so, those are the sorts of things that I think are really important to help cover the NBA, is to sort of lift the veil somewhat and tell the stories of what's going on. But there also needs to be decorum and respect and procedures in place that prevent situations where there's any obviously any physical contact or altercations.
Yep. On the other, final headline here that we got to talk about, Vince Carter finally gets honored by the Toronto Raptors. His jersey goes up. Not quite the normal jersey, right? Like it actually has an image of him with his the between the legs dunk that he's kind of famous for. Really cool ceremony. For some reason, a lot of Drake. Sure.
There's that great meme, get in there and make it about you. That's all I was thinking about. Trying to get into it with DeMar DeRozan. Honestly, I have to say the Raptors, 10 out of 10 for the way that they conducted that whole ceremony there. In the days leading up, they had an airplane, Air Canada on it. They retired the jersey that I think does represent Vince's time in Toronto the best. That's the one that he wore in the dunk contest. That's the series against Philadelphia, the Game 7, the miss there. But that certainly to me is the jersey that I remember Vince in the most. And everything was just really well done. Vince was emotional about it. Vince was, so happy and so satisfied. And this is what I thought was really important, because it didn't end well there in Toronto, and that's fine. That happens in sport
Mhm.
and in life. But you have to be able to move on as well from that and remember that not everything was bad. Things ended badly, like a lot of relationships. Maybe they end badly, but that doesn't mean the whole relationship sucked or that there was no good times. It was a really incredible time that Vince Carter had in Toronto, and what he did for that team, and how the city embraced him, and things, obviously you think people would have loved it if things worked out differently, but it didn't. But again, if it wasn't like, I mean, it wasn't one of those things that you can't get over and you shouldn't be able to get over in life. It's
Yeah.
like, hey man,
Took way too
we had
long.
some good times. Let's remember the good times, and let's do what really had to be done, which is putting his jersey in the rafters first. That franchise, honestly, would not necessarily maybe be there still if it wasn't for Vince. And so I have so much respect and admiration for him. I booed the hell out of him in 2004, 2005 when he first returned. And, glad to have gotten that out of the system too. But overall, I'm like, yeah, man, like, how can you not love the Vince Carter years in Toronto? I mean, it was amazing. He was an incredible player, so much fun to watch. Really one of those guys who's like, I'm paying money to watch this guy play,
Yeah.
and glad to see his rafter, and just to see what it meant to him and his family. He didn't just sort of accept this as a token, like, all right, great, I get my jersey retired. It really meant a lot to
He
him,
was
and I
emotional.
think
Yeah.
that was cool to see.
Yeah. Far too often these things just kind of linger and fester, and that relationship never really gets kind of mended. It never got this way between in the example that I'm going to use, but the Dodgers have their policy of you need to be a Hall of Famer to have your jersey retired. And for the longest time, Fernando Valenzuela was not a Hall of Famer, and it didn't look like it was going to happen. They finally did it in the last year or so, and it's a good thing that they did, because however many months later, Fernando passes away,
Mm.
and you just, there's nothing I think sadder than those posthumous honorary
Like with Bill
moments
Russell, that's what
that should, yeah,
they
yeah,
retired the number 6 after he passed away, and it's like, oh, we should have. Why were we
right.
sitting
Why
on
are we
that?
waiting?
Yeah,
Yeah, like,
like if that's something that was so quickly decided after he died, shouldn't we have done that while he was here, so he could have seen it and
yeah.
experienced the moment with him and his family? And yeah, one of the weird things is like, well, you're going to retire it now. It's like, oh, you had 80 odd years. Well, not that, of
Right.
course, but you know,
Yeah. Well, but
like,
like that's the thing here is with Vince is it's so easy to take these things for granted. It's so easy to just, oh, one
yeah,
day we'll get around to it. One day we'll get around to it. Surely one day we'll figure this out. I believe Kevin Garnett's number is not retired in Minnesota or something like that too. And it's just like
yeah,
just stop
he's
being so petty, you
yeah,
know?
he's still feuding with Glenn Taylor over several things. One of them being that he wanted Taylor to sell him the team, and he wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And so I think that relationship right now is certainly not getting any closer to being repaired. But Glenn's in his 80s as well, so
Yeah.
I think it's only a matter of time before KG's goes up there, but maybe not in Glenn Taylor's time.
Yeah. Well, it needs to happen sooner rather than later. And the guy pictured behind me, right? We thought we were going to have him for a lot longer than we thought, or for a lot longer than we actually did. And it was great to see Vince honored that way. Great to see how much it meant to him. And unfortunately there was just way too much Drake. It's like eating a meal, and then there's just like,
Yeah,
why did you put so much garlic? Like, why is there so
yeah,
much garlic in this
yeah,
thing? Um,
yeah. But just before we move on from that, another one of those things that the locker room access is really valuable is because DeMar DeRozan was in Atlanta on Friday before they went to Toronto. And so I spoke to him and I said, man, you're going up there to Toronto. I don't know if the NBA planned it this way. I don't think they did, but you're going to be there. You're a former Raptor. You'll be loved by the fans there. But you must know what it was like joining that team when he did. They weren't very good.
Yeah.
But you surely felt the impact and you saw the impact, and he talked so glowingly, and for again a guy who spent his first 9 years in Toronto and who probably will get his jersey retired as well at some point. There was no question in his mind that Vince's should have been the first one. Kyle Lowry was the same. I asked him when Philadelphia was here, same thing. Like these guys, have had really good careers with the Raptors, but none quite as impactful as Vince in the terms of like the individual impact that he had on the team. But they really honor and respect those who came before them. And both Kyle and DeMar, class guys all the
Yeah.
way, spoke so glowingly and so respectfully of Vince. So those are the sorts of conversations and stories that can really come out of being in the locker room, talking to those guys one-on-one, right there, sitting down next to them in the locker room, just having a conversation. Like DeMar did a press conference in Toronto, of course, with all the mics and the cameras, and that was great. But there's something different about just being right there with the person and just having a conversation. And those are the sorts of things that, hopefully won't be restricted, with the fallout from the Embiid situation.
Yep. All right. I looked in the mailbag. I don't see any email this week. You know what? We'll go ahead and blame that on the email address itself. Again, that's basketballpassportpod@gmail.com, where you could send us those notes or those questions. So with that out of the way, Leigh, where are we going on Thursday?
Yeah, very excited for Thursday because I haven't actually played here yet, but I am going to be playing in December in the beautiful Paris of the South America, Buenos Aires, Argentina, and very excited for what I've got cooking down there. It's going to be a couple of fun games played at some really cool courts, but also, I don't know if you saw it. I'm not going to put it up right now, but I'll have it for Thursday. Manu Ginobili, 47 years of age, still dunking.
Yeah.
Still dunking. So
I was actually going to grab the video and I was going to show it to you too. So we could save it for Thursday.
Save it for Thursday. So very, very excited for that one because I have been to Argentina before. It's a beautiful country. Buenos Aires is one of my favorite cities. I can't wait to eat meat, drink wine, play basketball, and hang out with the porteños down there. So it should be fun. Although Manu's not a porteño. He's from
Argentinian Malbec is one of my absolute favorites.
Yeah.
One of my
Don't forget, I've also got my calendar here that I'm working on.
Yes.
It's going to have all these cool courts from around the world that I've played on. Getting ready. How can I do this? Here we go. Whoops. There it is. That's the one there in Dubrovnik. So working on that for a Christmas gift. So if you're interested, drop us a little comment, send us an email, and I'll let you know exactly how you can get those. I haven't got them quite finalized yet, but I'll have them ready hopefully soon for the Christmas rush. I'm sure one would look beautiful in the Irwin household.
My buddy, I'd happily put that behind me somewhere. My buddy Philip Barnett had a great tweet today about Manu. It made me like guffaw. I just retweeted it. But he said Ginobili is bald and still has a bald spot.
Yeah.
Which is
that is a great tweet.
We'll post a video of Manu dunking, but there's a moment where he turns around and it's like, how does your head have 5 o'clock shadow?
Yeah.
All right. I think that is going to do it here for this week's episode of this Sunday, NBA centric edition of the Basketball Passport podcast. Still kind of figuring out on the fly how to, keep getting this down to, about 40 or so minutes. We're just steadily getting there. We're steadily, the World Series is behind us. Yeah, my Vikings are playing over there, but they suck right now. So I haven't paid almost any attention to that. But we're steadily getting this under wraps. But we do like to wander in the Thursday episodes as we go through these stories. And those episodes have been in absolute delight every time that we have recorded them. Really looking forward to the episode covering Argentina. And what an incredible history in basketball in Argentina there. So excited about that. A reminder, please do hit that subscribe button here on YouTube if you guys are watching live. If you guys are listening in the morning, please hit subscribe to wherever it is that you get your podcasts, preferably on Odyssey. I'm a company man. And hit those reviews. 5-star reviews on iTunes. I saw somebody say in here that they hit the like button already here for us. That stuff helps. So
Thanks very
appreciate
much,
that.
Tony Clifton. Yeah.
God King Tony Clifton. So thank you guys a ton for tuning in. Thank you, Leigh, for hopping on, and we'll talk to you guys on Thursday.